The morning sun glowed softly over Ankara's skyline as cameras flashed inside the Turkish presidential complex. President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan had called the press together for an announcement that would resonate far beyond Turkey's borders. He began with measured confidence, a mix of gratitude and resolve. After yesterday's agreement, thank God, the signatures were made today. We are very satisfied with the agreement, to which we actively contributed from the beginning. With those words, Erdoğan confirmed what diplomats had been quietly signalling for days. Turkey will join the international working group monitoring the newly signed Gaza ceasefire. The Turkish leader's remarks came as his delegation arrived in Cairo, where negotiators from the United States, Egypt and Qatar finalized the first phase of a US-brokered truce between Israel and Hamas. For Turkey, this is not just a gesture of support, it's a statement of identity. Ankara wants to be seen not as a bystander to Middle Eastern diplomacy, but as a guarantor of peace, reconstruction and moral responsibility. Erdoğan's government, long active in Gaza's humanitarian response, now seeks a direct role in implementing what he calls the most significant breakthrough in years. He continued in a tone both assertive and heartfelt. We hope that, as Turkey, we will also participate in the working group that will follow up on the concrete applications of the agreement. We will support reconstruction activities with the international community to help Gaza revive. Our goal is to end the genocide and bring peace to the region as soon as possible. The statement struck a deep chord across the region. From the streets of Istanbul to the refugee camps of Rafah, reactions poured in. For many, it was a reminder that Turkey, a NATO member with strong Islamic credentials, remains uniquely positioned to mediate between the West and the Arab world. This Gaza ceasefire, signed under the watchful eyes of US envoys, represents the first phase of President Donald Trump's much-discussed 20-point peace plan. Under its terms, Israel is expected to gradually withdraw its forces from the enclave, allowing humanitarian aid to flow freely and prisoners to be exchanged. Hamas, in turn, has agreed to suspend rocket fire, release hostages, and enter negotiations toward long-term political arrangements. Erdoğan's insistence on being part of the monitoring team underscores how central he wants Turkey's role to be. For him, this is not only about Gaza, it's about Turkey's standing in the world. After years of strained relations with Israel, tense diplomacy with Egypt, and shifting alliances with the Gulf, Ankara now sees a chance to re-emerge as the region's stabilizing power. In his next remarks, Erdoğan offered both diplomacy and diplomacy's currency, gratitude. I thank the President of the United States, Mr. Trump, who has demonstrated strong will by encouraging the Israeli government to a ceasefire. I also express my gratitude to Qatar and Egypt, which contributed significantly to the agreement. I wholeheartedly congratulate the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, for their resilient and cautious stance. That public appreciation was not just courteous, it was strategic. By praising Trump's strong will, Erdoğan reinforced Turkey's partnership with Washington, a partnership that has often been tested but remains critical in regional peacekeeping efforts. By thanking Qatar and Egypt, he recognized the quiet shuttle diplomacy that helped broker the final signatures. And by acknowledging Hamas, he reminded the world of Turkey's ability to speak to actors the West cannot directly engage. Analysts see this as part of Erdoğan's larger geopolitical vision, positioning Turkey as a bridge nation, Muslim but modern, assertive yet pragmatic, capable of dialogue with all sides. For Ankara, participation in Gaza's monitoring group means influence, credibility, and moral leverage. It also means risk, the risk of being blamed if the ceasefire fails. But Erdoğan's confidence stems from history. Turkey's engagement in regional crises isn't new. From Bosnia to Lebanon, from Libya to Syria, Turkish diplomacy has often walked the line between humanitarian advocacy and hard power. In Gaza, the challenge will be even greater. The Strip lies in ruins, 90% displaced, infrastructure destroyed, and millions relying on aid. The working group that Turkey wants to join will have to verify troop withdrawals, coordinate relief corridors, and monitor ceasefire violations in real time. Turkish officials say their role will be both technical and political. Ankara is preparing to send liaison officers to the Joint Mission headquarters in Cairo and to deploy humanitarian teams to Gaza once the ceasefire holds. Reconstruction aid is already being coordinated through AFAD, the Turkish disaster agency, and the Red Crescent. Plans include portable desalination systems, field hospitals, and a pilot housing project funded jointly with Qatar. Erdoğan's language throughout his address blended piety with policy. He spoke of Gaza not just as a diplomatic file, but as a moral duty. To end the genocide, he said, and bring peace to the region as soon as possible. The use of that word, genocide, was deliberate. It signals Turkey's moral framing of the conflict and positions Ankara as a defender of civilian lives, not merely an intermediary. The timing of this declaration is also significant. It comes just weeks after the Trump administration pushed through the final draft of its Phase 1 Gaza deal, hailed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio as the foundation of lasting calm. Erdoğan's endorsement provides the agreement with something Washington cannot manufacture on its own: legitimacy in the eyes of the wider Muslim world. In Europe, the reaction has been cautiously positive. French, German, and British officials have all welcomed Turkey's involvement, though they emphasize the need for transparency. European diplomats hope Turkey's engagement will reduce tensions between Hamas and Israel and prevent further regional escalation. At the same time, some Israeli politicians remain skeptical, arguing that Ankara's historic ties with Hamas could compromise its neutrality. Still, within Israel's defense establishment, there is growing recognition that without Turkey's logistical and political reach, enforcing the ceasefire could prove impossible. Inside Turkey, Erdoğan's statement was met with both pride and relief. State media framed the president's words as proof of Turkey's restored diplomatic leadership. Opposition newspapers, while critical of his close ties with Hamas, conceded that his presence in the peace framework gives Ankara unprecedented leverage. In the eyes of Turkish citizens, weary of regional instability and eager for global recognition, this role enhances national prestige. But Erdoğan's remarks went beyond national pride. They carried a personal tone, that of a leader who sees Gaza's pain as inseparable from Turkey's conscience. Over the years, he has visited refugee camps, hosted Palestinian leaders, and turned domestic rallies into calls for Gaza's liberation. This latest initiative blends that long-standing emotional narrative with pragmatic diplomacy. Meanwhile, in Cairo, where the ceasefire was signed, negotiators welcomed Turkey's participation. Egyptian diplomats described Ankara's offer to join the monitoring mission as constructive, noting that Turkey brings both credibility and capability. Qatar's foreign ministry echoed that sentiment, calling it a step towards sustainable peace. At the United Nations, discussions have already begun on formalizing the Gaza monitoring mechanism, a civilian-military hybrid mission that will include observers from Turkey, the US, Egypt, and Qatar. If approved, the mission will begin within weeks, reporting directly to a joint operations center in Cairo. For Erdoğan, the symbolism of this is powerful. Turkey will not just observe peace, it will enforce it. This aligns with his long-term strategy of projecting Turkey as both protector and partner in regional security. The human cost of the conflict, however, remains staggering. Nearly 70,000 Palestinians have been killed since the start of the war, and entire neighborhoods reduced to dust. Aid agencies say full reconstruction could take decades. Yet, in the midst of this devastation, Erdoğan's message is one of cautious optimism, that even amid ruins, peace can still take root. As he closed his remarks, his tone softened, the cadence of a prayer more than a proclamation. Our goal is to end the genocide and bring peace to the region as soon as possible. Those words, carried by global broadcasters within minutes, marked the latest turn in a long and painful saga. For some, they symbolized hope, the belief that Turkey's intervention might finally translate talk into action. For others, they sounded like yet another promise in a cycle of endless conflict. Yet even Erdoğan's critics admit that his presence changes the dynamic. A ceasefire involving Turkey, the United States, Egypt, and Qatar has a depth of coordination unseen since the Oslo process decades ago. Whether it succeeds or not, Ankara has secured a seat at the table where the future of Gaza will be decided. And so, from Ankara's grand halls to Gaza's shattered streets, a new chapter begins. The signatures may be dry, but the challenge ahead is immense. Enforcing peace where distrust runs deep, rebuilding where everything has been lost. For President Erdoğan, this is both a test and an opportunity, a test of Turkey's capacity to balance principle with power and an opportunity to reshape a region through action rather than rhetoric. The world now watches as Turkey steps forward, not as a spectator, but as a guarantor of a fragile hope. And in the echoes of the president's words to help Gaza revive lies the promise of a nation determined to turn diplomacy into deliverance.
Dünkü mutabakattan sonra hamdolsun bugün de imzalar atıldı. Bizim de ilk baştan itibaren aktif katkı verdiğimiz anlaşmadan büyük memnuniyet duyuyoruz. Anlaşmanın sahadaki uygulamalarını takip edecek görev gücünde Türkiye olarak inşallah biz de yer alacağız. Gazze'nin tekrar ayağa kaldırılabilmesi için uluslararası toplumla birlikte yeniden imar faaliyetlerine destek olacağız. Amacımız soykırımın durması ve bölgeye huzurun bir an evvel gelmesidir. Ateşkese teşvik edilmesinde güçlü bir irade sergileyen Amerikan Başkanı Sayın Trump'a teşekkür ediyorum. Anlaşmaya varılmasına önemli katkılar veren Qatar ve Mısır'a aynı şekilde şükranlarımı iletiyorum. Filistin Direniş Hareketi Hamas'ı dirayetli ve basiretli tutumları dolayısıyla canı gönülden tebrik ediyorum.